Hey everybody, we're going, whoa, that's a little loud, sorry. We're going to go on and get started here. I'm going to break from tradition and being from the South, ladies go first, and I'm going to yield to our ranking member, if that would be okay. And you can make your opening statements, ma'am. And you've been great to work with and very accommodating, and this is a little new for me, as y'all can imagine. They don't usually make people like me, well, they don't make people like her, Chairman. I think they both sent us here to die. So anyway, ma'am, you go right ahead. Thank you.
Well, that is very kind of you and very Southern of you. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to our witnesses who are joining us here today and to all who are joining us. I know there's been a lot of scheduling gymnastics to get to this point, but we're excited for a reboot of this subcommittee that is actually focused on duplicative and fragmented government programs and how to make the government actually work for the American people, because the programs that our federal agencies carry out are actually very important and life-sustaining, and particularly for our communities that are on fixed incomes, our seniors, and individuals who depend on the life-saving support services of the federal government. We want to make sure that those programs work for the people. And so we're hoping on a bipartisan basis that through this reboot, we can really tackle the unglamorous and complicated work of making our government more efficient, with a focus on ensuring that it serves the people while maintaining the critical life-saving programs that are important to the federal government. I know this is a roundtable, which actually I think will be a nice venue for having more of a conversation about these issues, because at the end of the day, this takes rolling up our sleeves and getting to work. And I know that myself and the chairman have had a number of conversations, and we really are truly dedicated to trying to do this work on a bipartisan basis. But I also hope that we do get back to normal committees as we're able to. Certainly, we have a lot of important work, and I think we're also hoping to advance some bipartisan legislation to fix issues that come up through this work and these conversations. I want to start my comments by focusing from the constituent side of the equation. Through my office, we serve thousands of New Mexicans every day, and the vast majority of constituent casework that we do is actually trying to navigate the federal system. That includes providing help and access to the IRS, to Social Security, to veterans benefits. And as you all know, these are truly the important programs that affect the everyday lives of our constituents. But at the heart of how we address the challenges that so many of our communities face is addressing outdated systems, inconsistent communication and management inside these agencies, unclear requirements, unnecessary barriers, and just to put it plainly, bureaucracy. And so really what we're here today to do is to talk about how to make the government more user-friendly, to make sure that it actually is transparent and it serves the needs of our people. So I'm grateful today to have our our acting comptroller from GAO. GAO, of course, is Congress's body that helps us identify how to eliminate waste. And GAO has, for many, many years, identified the areas that we can really streamline government and use a thoughtful, fact-based, nonpartisan approach to addressing these issues, and certainly not the insanity that we saw earlier this year with the gutting of programs through DOGE, which has left so many of our programs in shambles, and unfortunately with hundreds of lawsuits that still have yet to be resolved. So I'm looking forward to hearing from GAO about the recommendations for where we should be focusing our work. I know the chairman and I have already agreed on a number of areas that we would like to see improvements, including modernization of IT, reduction of duplication, reducing spending on the military, and many other areas where I think there is fruitful ground for bipartisan work. Finally, I think that one of the things that I would really like to see this committee take on is tackling corruption. There's certainly a lot of fertile ground for that. And I know that the chairman is one of the co-sponsors of ending stock trading in Congress. And I think there are many proposals like that we should be focused on in this committee that would not only make the government work better, but also reduce the impact of big money in politics and corruption in politics. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chairman, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, ma'am. And good afternoon to y'all, and I want to thank everybody for being here and welcome everyone to my first roundtable as chair of the Delivering on Government Efficiency Subcommittee, and I intend to do all I can with the gavel to rein in the spiraling deficit and $39 trillion in debt that threatens the fabric of our great nation. This issue impacts all Americans, Republicans and Democrats alike, and I met recently with Ms. Stansberry, and she and I agreed that there are topics of bipartisan interest affecting this nation's fiscal future that this subcommittee can take up. And that includes today's topic with the vast swaths of duplication and overlap among federal programs and activities. Today's roundtable is a little different from typical hearings and will be more informal. We will not keep time, and I will not be recognizing members to speak as we typically do with hearings. And I hope this is an informal yet informative conversation between the members of our subcommittee and the subject matter experts with us today, which y'all are. And I hope all of my colleagues feel empowered to ask questions along the way. In recent decades, as federal spending has grown to $7 trillion annually, federal agencies and programs have spiraled out of control. There's no official count of federal agencies, but more than 400 are listed in the Federal Register. And a number of federal financial assistance programs rose from just over 1,000 in 1970 to more than 2,400 in 2023. In 2010, a bill hiking the debt limit, Congress did something useful. It asked our legislative branch's auditing agency, the Government Accounting Office, the GAO. We don't do initials in my office. It confuses me. So TVA, IRS, I know what those stand for, but the rest get me a little, I try to enunciate the titles. And with reporting annually on duplication across the federal government and recommending what to do about it. Since that time, though, the Government Accounting Office has chronicled a vast web of duplicative, overlapping, and fragmented federal government agencies. The Government Accounting Office has evaluated the extent of duplication in program areas ranging from social welfare to STEM education. We've all heard about massive fraud taking place across welfare programs in Minnesota and elsewhere. In fact, the GAO has estimated that the federal government loses up to $500 billion annually due to fraud. One factor driving that fraud is a vast, outdated network of federal and state-administered welfare programs. While attracted to sophisticated fraudsters and transnational criminal organizations, the complexity makes it hard for low-income Americans that the programs were created for to access intended benefits, and I represent a lot of those folks. One of our guests today provided us this graphic showing the complex machine that is our federal welfare system. Looks like somebody just took a shotgun and blasted it with different colors, is what it looks like to me. And how is the average American supposed to navigate this system when they have responsibilities to their families? The GAO has recommended remedial actions that Congress and the executive branch could take to address duplication, streamline government, and save hundreds of billions of dollars. And today we will discuss those recommendations as well as others from our guests. At the end of today's hearing, I'm introducing the Duplication Scoring Act, because that kind of ticks me off. It's not in my notes, but it ticks me off when we have these dadgum committees and we're going to write somebody a tough letter and do all this and that. And we don't ever propose any dadgum legislation. And to me, that's just a waste of time. We're just doing it for clickbait, and we're doing it for show, and we're going to get down to work. And that's probably why there's not any media in here, because we're not screaming at each other. It doesn't give them anything. She and I come from different backgrounds. We got different beliefs, but dadgummit, we know that if we can save dollars, we can get that money to folks that really need it. And I've lost my place. I'm also working with the Office of Management and Budget on legislation to make it easier to identify and rescind duplicative programs, and I'm now pleased to introduce our roundtable guests. First, we have, I'm going to get the name right, Oris Williams Brown. Right on. Well, Birch it. Nobody gets that right, so there you go. Ms. Brown is the acting Comptroller General of the U.S. Government Accountability Office. She has led the GAO since Jean Darrow retired from the CG role late last year. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being here. My mama would, if she were here, she'd hug your neck. She liked seeing women in powerful positions. So that's great, because she was very powerful in my life. Next, we have Paul Winfrey. Mr. Winfrey is the president and CEO of the Economic Policy Innovation Center. He was deputy assistant to the president for domestic policy and deputy director of the Domestic Policy Council at the White House. Mr. Winfrey, thank you, brother. It's a pleasure. Next, we have Matt Weidinger. Did I get it? All right, Matt. Thanks, brother. Mr. Weidinger is a senior fellow and Rose Scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. He was a longtime staff director of the House Ways and Means Subcommittee overseeing safety net programs. Thank you, brother. Lastly, we have Bobby Kogan. Mr. Kogan is the senior director of budget policy in the Center for American Progress. With that, we'll get on with it. And how do we want to do this? We want to recognize the lady first? Ma'am, please. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, thank you. So good afternoon, Chairman Burchett, Ranking Member Stansberry, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss GAO's body of work on duplication as part of today's roundtable on improving the efficiency of the federal government. For the last 15 years, GAO has produced an annual report on duplication, overlap, and fragmentation across government as mandated by Congress, and has raised concerns about its role in federal inefficiency. This annual report shows our wide range of work in this area. Moreover, given the nation's unsustainable fiscal path, we broadened the scope to include additional opportunities for cost savings and revenue enhancements. Over this period, we have reported on thousands of actions that Congress and agencies could take to address duplication, overlap, and fragmentation, and other cost savings or revenue enhancements. As of last March, Congress and agencies had taken some action to address 78% of them. Moreover, this body of work had resulted in $725 billion in cost savings or revenue enhancements since 2010, including over $56 billion in last year's report alone. And there are additional actions that Congress and federal agencies can take to realize $100 billion or more in additional financial benefits and address inefficiencies that exist in several program areas. Moreover, overlap and fragmentation adds to the complexity of service delivery, as you both have mentioned, which increases the risk of fraud, waste, and abuse. This requires program officials to balance the tension between ensuring that appropriate controls are in place and providing timely, critical services to eligible beneficiaries, making fraud prevention a key part of mission delivery. To begin to tackle this issue comprehensively, Congress needs three things. One, a comprehensive inventory of federal programs and key information about each one. OMB has made progress in recent years, but more work needs to be done to improve the usefulness of the information provided, as we point out in our most recent report on the status of the federal program inventory. Two, Congress needs information on program effectiveness to be able to determine which programs are working as intended and which ones are not. Making meaningful progress on this one requires Congress to hold agencies accountable for providing this critical information, for example, through congressional oversight and the authorization and appropriations processes. Congress can hold agencies accountable for results. And three, the roles and authorities delineated to agencies involved in tackling national policy issues must be clear. If roles and authorities are unclear or overlapping, collaborating and initiating change becomes even more difficult. With these, Congress will have much of what it needs to begin to make decisions about which programs and areas are working as intended and are a good use of taxpayer dollars, and which ones are not and may need to be modified or eliminated. GAO has also taken steps aimed at helping to address these challenges. We have developed a framework for evaluating duplication, overlap, and fragmentation. We've identified leading practices for collaboration, identified lessons learned from past grant consolidation efforts, and developed a fraud risk framework, among others. All of these can help inform any future actions. While the basic steps outlined earlier sound straightforward, they are not. Acting on the information will require trade-offs that only Congress can make. Any restructuring or consolidation efforts require involving all the stakeholders in the process to ensure that unintended consequences are mitigated and congressional priorities are clear. However, as I said earlier, the nation's unsustainable fiscal path makes improving federal efficiency imperative. GAO stands ready to support in these efforts. Chairman Burchett, Ranking Member Stansberry, and members of the subcommittee, this concludes my opening statement, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, and happy opening day to all who celebrate. I think the Yankees play the Giants tonight. And, you know, this isn't in my remarks, but, you know, I think it's important to say here at the outset that the Government Accountability Office is absolutely the gold standard for oversight, and it's important that initiatives that go forward that Congress is considering make sure that they have the resources that they need to continue that along. As the chairman said, you know, the national debt's $39 trillion, or about 126% of GDP. Over the next year, $9.97 trillion in public debt will be maturing. Each month, Treasury rolls over about $1 to $1.5 trillion in short-term treasuries. These are 4 to 13-week Treasury securities. The government strategy in place since the Biden administration is obvious. They're hoping that yields on long-term debt will fall before refinancing. But too much sovereign debt issuance has flooded global markets since the pandemic spending surge, and with the dollar weakening, it is critical that we must now bring deficits back to sustainable levels to reduce risk and avoid a crisis. What this means for Congress is that it's critical to determine whether there are functionally duplicative programs and capture efficiency gains wherever possible. There are several areas that are worthy of immediate attention. The first is low-income support programs that are rife with inefficiencies, benefit cliffs, and poor incentives that do not support intended beneficiaries. The second is the expiration of pandemic-era programs that will put political pressure on Congress to continue inflationary and duplicative assistance to states and local governments. And the third is broadband subsidies that have received a tremendous amount of attention over the last few years and attracted some wasteful initiatives. Over the past decade, mandatory spending on low-income assistance has grown from roughly $700 billion 10 years ago to $1.2 trillion today. This growth has produced a fragmented system. Now there are hundreds of low-income assistance programs, many of which are functionally duplicative. Housing is a clear example. There are at least 160 separate housing and rental assistance programs administered by more than 20 federal entities, and yet housing affordability has not improved. In fact, recent evidence from local government shows that regulatory reform and permitting improvements have done more to reduce rents than subsidies. Poor coordination across programs also creates harmful unintended consequences called benefit cliffs, which Matt here to my left knows all too well about. These occur when small increases in net income or changes in family structure trigger large losses in benefits and higher taxes, leaving families worse off financially. In some cases, people face penalties for accepting promotions or pursuing higher-paying careers. Crisis response has also made this problem worse. When emergencies occur, Congress typically layers new programs on top of existing ones. The state and local fiscal recovery fund created during the pandemic is a good example of this. Its broad authorization and weak oversight have funded low-value projects and increased intergovernmental dependence on federal transfers. For example, $185 million from the SLFRF went to projects related to improving golf courses. $400 million went to building swimming pools. $34 million went to building tennis and pickleball courts. And one Illinois town received $15 million to install commercial showers so they could wash elephants when they were trying to attract them to come to the circus in that town. Congress should allow the SLFRF to fully expire at the end of this year without renewed funding, and next time an emergency occurs, they should add proper oversight controls to avoid duplicative and wasteful spending. The same pattern is visible in broadband policy. More than $800 billion in federal funding has been directed towards a broadband expansion across 133 programs administered by 15 federal agencies. $800 billion, 133 programs, 15 federal agencies, often without formal coordination mechanisms to prevent duplication. There's actually a great GAO report on this that was published last summer. Those statistics are from that report. And yet another attempt to increase the supply of broadband, the IIJA provided $45 billion to the Department of Commerce's Broadband Access, Equity, and Deployment, or BEAD program. The BEAD program's failures in connecting households have been well documented. Fortunately, the Trump administration has modified the BEAD program's rules to reduce costs associated with deploying broadband. But the administration has now said that there's about $20 to $21 billion left over in non-deployment funding. States are proposing to use these funds for workforce development and job training. However, this would only duplicate existing programs outside of the Department of Commerce's usual jurisdiction. Therefore, Congress should consider either rescinding these funds or redirecting them towards more appropriate uses. Congress has tools to fix these issues by supporting comprehensive audits of federal programs, enforcing coordination across agencies, allowing duplicative emergency programs to expire, and using existing rescission authorities to eliminate funding that's no longer needed. But Congress should also reform the budget process itself so that duplication is avoided in the first place. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Burchett, Ranking Member Stansbury, members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to talk. I won't repeat the very gracious introduction the chairman gave for me, other than to say that for 20 years I was like your staff, laboring over these programs, and especially the kind of means-tested and low-income space. So I would echo what the ranking member said about that being an unglamorous exercise, and congratulate the subcommittee for taking a look at this, because it's very rare for Congress to take a step back and say, hey, what are we doing across programs that actually works and makes sense, and often, as the chart sort of depicts, really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. On Monday, I released a report that includes the chart, but also sort of discusses duplication in three general areas: federal means-tested benefit programs, to a certain degree, state and local programs that pair up with those federal programs, and also those are permanent programs, and then temporary programs that Congress often creates in a recession, also mostly to help low-income individuals. So for example, the regime of pandemic unemployment benefits, bigger benefits, longer checks, supplemental payments, and things like that that are actually quite complementary to this question. I'm going to summarize that report in just a few points. So first, as the chairman noted, there are many permanent federal programs designed to assist low-income families. So the chart is based on a review that the Congressional Research Service made about a decade ago that found that there were more than 90 such programs. So that includes 12 health, 5 cash, 15 food, 17 housing, 28 education and training, 16 social services, and 2 energy programs. Now, there are other people who look at this universe and find significantly different numbers. So Mr. Winfrey pointed to a significantly larger number of housing programs. Some of that depends on what's your definition of program, who's funding it, is it means tested, all that. Bottom line is, there's a lot of federal programs. There are also many programs that are supplemental to that in the sense that they're funded by state and local governments alone. Second point is, Congress regularly creates temporary programs that add to that number and add significantly to the amount of spending under that sort of permanent system, especially during recessions. So during the pandemic, unemployment benefit expansions assisted literally tens of millions more, while doubling the number of federal cash assistance programs focused on low income and often out of work individuals. The third, as Mr. Winfrey pointed out, the cost of these programs is significant and growing. So in 2025, just the 90-plus federal means-tested programs cost about $1.2 trillion, and that was matched by about $300 billion in additional state matching spending for those programs alone. Nominal spending over roughly the past decade has increased by 65%, according to the Congressional Budget Office. And during the pandemic, temporary programs, so you know about stimulus checks and all that, but just the regime of extended and expanded unemployment benefits added about $700 billion in additional federal funding. Much of that, as we can discuss, was lost to fraud and abuse for various reasons. Fourth, many of those programs are duplicative, but the exact count of that depends on what your definition of duplication is. GAO has, in their statement, has provided a definition that says duplication is really sort of precisely matched benefits. So same person gets benefit, the same sort of benefit from two different programs, as opposed to other definitions of duplication, which might include things like overlap and so forth. Many federal and state programs duplicate each other's benefits. Many federal programs take on what otherwise might be state responsibilities. And then some federal benefit expansions actually conceal what might be called duplication. So again, it depends on what your definition of duplication is, how much duplication there actually is. I think the bottom line is there's a lot, but that's somewhat subject to interpretation. Fifth, the cost of duplication really exceeds the amount spent on benefits. And this kind of goes to what the ranking member was saying. Operating dozens of overlapping programs creates unnecessary administrative complexity, especially for the people who are looking for assistance. It makes it harder for them to get the help that they need, makes it harder for states to administer that help. As Mr. Winfrey alluded, multiple programs providing similar benefits, often with phase-outs as incomes go up, contribute to what are called benefit cliffs. That when somebody goes to work, gets a raise, gets a promotion, works more hours, they can actually lose money because multiple benefits are phasing out at the same time. That not only affects their incentives to work, it affects important things like incentives to marry as well, which has a profound effect on poverty. GAO has reported previously that 3 of the 4 programs with the largest annual losses to fraud are means tested. And as I said, hastily created temporary pandemic unemployment benefits saw staggering losses during the pandemic. So the official estimate of how much was lost to fraud and improper spending under unemployment benefit programs during the pandemic is about $200 billion. Unofficial estimates go to double that. So that is out of $900 billion, $700 in federal funding, $200 in state funding on unemployment benefits alone, and some experts think that $400 billion of that was lost. Much of it flowed overseas to international criminal gangs. Some of those are associated with foreign governments, the Red Army, the Russian government. So there's a lot there when it comes to fraud and abuse, especially involving pandemic programs. And the last point is there are policy responses that can be made to reduce the number of programs and consolidate funds into more easily administrable amounts, bless you, that will address some of those things. So we have, I'd say, a long tradition of reform of, especially in the welfare space, things like block grants that consolidate funding, hold states accountable for better results, getting people to work, getting people up and off of benefit programs, moving them up the income ladder, that can be looked to if you want to apply programmatic reforms that will make a difference in this space. It also doesn't have to proceed from the big, expensive benefit programs at the top. Of that chart, 80% of the spending is on the biggest 10 programs or so, but most of the programs are very small programs that I think are probably ripe for consolidation and the most likely bipartisan things to consolidate because they don't involve Medicaid and food stamps and large tax credit programs. They're much smaller programs that really contribute largely to this question of complexity, but are the most poised to be reformed. So with that, thank you very much.
Oh, votes. Bobby, could we come back to you? You can lead us off when we get back since it is the opening baseball season. And like I said, there'll be 2 votes, and I think they're 15-minute votes. So probably in 4 hours we will be back here. But if we can do that, we'll stand in recess and then come back. Get you first, brother. Thank you. Is that all right? All right. Please feel free to have a complimentary water while we're gone.
We'll be around. Yeah.
Of course.
We'll do our own votes over here.
We'll use the committee credit card to order some pizzas. It's all good. Thank you.
I was telling you, your colleagues and my wife worked at GAO for 15 years. And she
Congress
was
rolls
in,
right along.
PI, did like telecom. Well, she started off doing.
Not this one. I was the staff director of the welfare
I
subcommittee
don't
at
know if
Ways
it's a
and
big
Means.
deal anymore, but there used to be this really interesting issue on federal courthouse use. Well, basically, they were all overbuilt.
Started in
And the House,
'95,
because
so
they
I
don't
actually
name any
came on board
House
right as we were doing
There was
welfare reform in the
major
'90s.
bipartisan
And
consensus around,
with the exception of a
we
year,
gotta
I
get
was
rid of
there
these
until
things. Like,
2018.
we can force consolidation here. In the Senate, they're like, nah, they might
reform
name one
or
of
my
those after
time
me at
working
some
on the
point in the
committee?
future, so I'm not going to downsize.
Yeah, I think
the
it
federal,
actually, in the
judiciary
history of American
space,
social
but,
policy, it's actually
but she started off in that
surprising
area,
and surprisingly
and,
bipartisan
but she
success.
went to GAO right after grad school and was in the PDP program, and it really set her career really well.
Yes,
She
it
has
is.
good thoughts. We still have lots of friends at GAO. So, yeah, it's a great organization.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How long have you been
Oh,
in
really?
AI now?
And we found in the design.
Do you like it more or less?
They made some changes to the standards.
Yeah.
I like it, I'll say this, I like it at this stage in my life. Right? Like, you know, working on the Hill is kind of a young person's game. Like, you were in the administration, right?
Yeah, so I did 6 years in the Hill.
much
I
bigger
did transition team.
Yeah.
I did 2.5 years in admin, and it's like a totally different world here. Huge pluses, huge minuses, and FOMO on either side.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I liked what I did when I was here. It's often frustrating.
Yeah.
I probably did the most important thing early in my career, but there was lots of other stuff, you know, along the way.
Yeah.
But
I just got a call too, saying that thanks for.
yeah, I mean, working in a think tank is easy by comparison to 9 to 5-ish. So, and at this stage of my life, I value that. So.
Hi, Mike. Speaker.
Funny, so when so I joined CAP in 2023, when Nira was still in
It's
the
true.
admin,
I mean, even when
and
you
it
look,
was-
you know,
it was very
international.
Because it was blocking the camera.
Oh, I
So
see.
we'll put it up
Okay.
when we.
I got you. Whatever you tell me when we go.
Technically, you just need one.
Yeah.
You don't need
Let me take a picture of that.
You're weighing the cognitive issues with
I'll cut y'all out. Crop y'all. Where are you from, Miss Brown?
I am from Spotsylvania County, Virginia.
Right on.
I'm ready to read. I'm ready to project. I was a forward theater kid. I'm ready to go.
I played Stephen Foster in our, what grade was that? Fifth grade play? I think it was fifth grade, yeah. And my opening, that was in 1975. My opening line was, "It warms my heart to see all these folks here today."
It stuck with you.
Literally, I thought I was going to throw up before it started, and then I had to do 2 performances.
You had state fright.
Oh, dude, 1970, I was 5th grade. Are you kidding me?
Now you speak in front of all the time.
That's fine. I don't care. We're good. Thank you. Worried about me saying that. I don't care. I want everybody to know I was Stephen Foster. He wrote my old Kentucky home. The sun shines bright. I remember they said, "You got to really be loud, Tim." And I was so loud, I can remember I was in the gym at West Hills Elementary School. And I'm sure you read about it in all the magazines. But I remember I could see out at the door in the principal's office. I could see in there, it was so loud, they were looking around going, "What is it?"
That's good. You were using
That's
your
great.
diaphragm to project.
Thank you, dude. What's your first name again?
It's Bobby.
Bobby. Thank you, Bobby. You're truly special. It's Tim, dude. Every time you say congressman, somebody live around some 95-year-old on a walker.
That's a senator.
That would be sad.
That's a senator, yeah.
I worked in the gym for a long time. I know what we're talking about.
Run for Congress, they said, to be a great meeting of intellectual minds, they said. Thank goodness the girl in my office showed me how to get on Facebook Marketplace yesterday. I got something to do with my brain. Purple's my favorite color, by the way. It's a color of royalty. Mama, right before she died, well, a while before she died, she made me a quilt. It's purple. I sleep with it up here in my office. In the 60s, Chrysler made, they had a purple on their cars in the early 70s. It was called Plum Crazy. And that's how we identified colors. I wasn't very good with colors. My mama would, "What color's that car, baby?" "It's purple, Mom." I mean, it had bed sheets, purple, curtains, everything. My gerbils gnawed through my purple bed sheets, but I liked them so much I wouldn't let my mama throw them out. So until I was like in high school, I had these gnawed up. There's a hole in them. Go ahead, dude. I'm sorry.
No, I interrupted. I was going to say it's the same way. My parents at the age of 3, I got a bunk bed and they said, "What color sheets?" And I got this nice lavender. I always liked the deep purple. And thus, when I was watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, very important when I was growing up.
Yep.
I was like,
Let's go. You ready? Let's roll. All right, everybody, we're going to... Sorry about that. Do I sound that bad in real life? I really do sound that bad in real life. We're going to get started. Somebody told me the mics were hot when I was talking earlier, and I really don't care. So, Bobby, you're up, brother. Mr. Cogan.
Uh-oh.
If the green
My
light
goodness.
comes
Okay,
on,
this
you're
is on.
There you go.
Thank you so much. Chairman Burchett, Ranking Member Stansbury, members of the subcommittee, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I intend to make 3 points. First, the government owes good service to the American people. Second, looking for duplication should not be cover for cutting assistance. It's important, but it shouldn't be cover for cutting assistance. And third, any savings from increased efficiency, while very important, pale in comparison to the cost of the tax cuts enacted this century. To the first point, the purpose of government is to serve. It's to make people's lives better. Increasing efficiency is a worthy and important goal, and I am very glad that this committee is looking at it. But therefore, the primary focus of growing efficiency should be about better serving Americans, and only secondarily about reducing costs to the government. Sometimes programs and their administration should be combined, sometimes they should stay split, but it is not primarily about dollars to the government. It is about efficiency and efficacy for the people whom the government is serving. If policymakers find a way to cut administrative costs for the federal government by dramatically increasing the burden on the American people, then they've made it worse, not better. And that brings me to my second point, which is that these efforts must not be a secret tool for cutting the services themselves. In most cases, programs that people allege are duplicative are not actually duplicative. Frequently, they are deliberately set up to serve different populations or to address different difficulties. Sometimes it can make sense to combine the administration of those programs nonetheless, but Congress should always ensure that those specific groups still receive the intended services and benefits. So for example, we have a program that does housing for veterans. We have a program that does housing for the elderly. You might want to combine the administration of them. You might not want to combine the administration of them, but you certainly wouldn't want to just smush them together because then we wouldn't be necessarily taking care of the specific groups you're trying to take care of. Even when you do find truly duplicative programs, that cannot be an excuse to cut the benefits themselves. And so suppose there are two different $50 million programs that do the exact same thing, truly duplicative, and Congress gets rid of one of them. That is not eliminating duplication, that is cutting $50 million in benefits, and it's making people worse off. Furthermore, block granting programs has traditionally led to dramatic cuts to services and oftentimes led, ironically, to less oversight. The quintessential example is TANF, whose real value has declined roughly 60% since its creation, and which now allows for so much flexibility and so much discretion that it barely serves its actual purpose of providing basic assistance for children anymore. And that brings me to the final point, which is that if Congress is really focused on the deficit, which it should be, this is an important area, but it is the wrong area to be putting the bulk of its focus. If Congress implemented every single recommendation in GAO's giant report, that would amount to very roughly $20 billion in savings every year. The tax cuts from the big beautiful bill lost about 25 to 30 times that much in federal revenue. So in other words, you could take every single recommendation that GAO offered, noting, by the way, that the hypermajority of those savings do not actually come from stopping duplicative programs, and instead come from interesting things like doing Medicare site-neutral payments and ensuring better IRS enforcements against tax cheats. Anyway, if you did all of those, this Congress would still be in the red by more than $500 billion every year because of the tax cuts this body enacted 9 months ago. The 10-year cost of the tax cuts that began in 2017 and then were made permanent and expanded last year is $5.8 trillion, assuming the new temporary provisions are extended. The Bush tax cuts lose that much in revenue all over again. On top of the more than $1 trillion in lost revenue every year from those tax cuts, the government loses another $725 billion each year from tax cheats and from misfiled taxes. The logic of working hard to find every single penny of efficiency in spending on programs that serve ordinary people is never applied to the richest Americans and their taxes. The richest Americans are not asked to do more with less. They are not asked if their tax cuts are efficient. In fact, it is the other way around. Congress keeps coming up with new and creative ways to cut taxes for those with the most. In contrast, the big beautiful bill actually made the largest cuts to the social safety net in all of US history, quite literally taking food away from hungry children and health care away from sick Americans. I do think that bringing down deficits from current levels is a good goal. Just unequivocally, I think it's a good goal. But it needs to be done responsibly, and it needs to be done in a way that does not hurt struggling Americans by cutting the programs that they rely on. Congress should look first to reversing some of the tax cuts that were enacted this century, and they're costing the government more than $1 trillion per year. And really quickly, this was not in my prepared remarks, but low-income programs have been flat as a percent of GDP and in recent years.
Say that again.
Low-income programs are projected to be flat as a percent of GDP. So if you are focused on government spending, that is not the part of the government that is growing. The part of the government that is growing is Medicare and Social Security, but it is not low-income programs. So I just think it's really important that Congress always remember that it is serving the American people, and we can't help the people hurting the most. Thank you very much.
All right. I think we'll go into questions. We were going to, is it okay if, would you like to go, or can I let Bobert, you want to say something?
Go ahead.
No, okay, ma'am. Go right ahead then. We're good.
All right. Well, I was taking lots of notes, and it's great to be here in this listening session today with other fellow nerds. I'm a former OMB nerd.
Speak for yourself.
And I used to work in the interior branch at OMB, and in fact, one of the key roles that I played was helping in trying to do cross-cut analysis of conservation programs to figure out how do you consolidate duplicative programs, how do you build out programs so that they're more effective, how do you get more bang for the buck, and then how do you make sure that programs ultimately are serving folks on the ground who need the money. And there's all different kinds of models on how you approach this. And I'll just say that, I don't think that DOJ had wrong the idea that there needs to be a streamlined process to achieve that end goal. But I think the challenging piece, which I think, Ms. Brown, you brought up, is that you need congressional authority to do these consolidations. And so one of the things I did, both when I worked at OMB and then I was a Senate staffer in Senate Energy Committee, was try to think about, well, how would you create a streamlined statutory process so that you could do consolidation, and does it make sense to do it thematically, like streamline and consolidate housing programs, but with an eye towards delivery and filling gaps, so you're not cutting programs. And so I know we had some legislation go through the Oversight Committee that basically would hand over that authority to the administration, which I couldn't vote for because I felt like that was abdicating Congress's role. But I wonder, Ms. Brown, you talked in your testimony about needing a comprehensive inventory, data about effectiveness. Obviously, we do have some performance data from the agencies, but it's spotty and inconsistent. And then an inventory of roles and authorities. But when you think about the magnitude of, I think part of why we have so much duplication, and you guys have worked on the Hill, is that every Congress, some congressperson thinks up a great idea and they get another bill passed that creates a new program and a new authority and a new budget line item. And so when you think about this, how would we consolidate and streamline this volume of thousands of programs across the federal government?
So I think it really starts with the inventory, because I think that would provide the clearest picture of the programs and the spending, because the other thing that Congress doesn't have visibility into is not only not having the programs identified, but how much money is going to a particular policy area. And if I think about the way to approach it, it would be having that information, being able to see how much money is targeted, and then deciding, is that the right amount? Is it enough? We may not be spending enough money in a particular area, or is it way more than we expected we did because it's so splintered? So to your point, the way duplication happens is that someone isn't aware that there is a program somewhere in an agency that addresses an issue. And to your point, someone wants to address a situation and they come up with a program, develop a program to do it. So I think members are well-intentioned in doing that, but I also think duplication, overlap, and fragmentation really is a symptom of programs that have not met the intended goal. Because the reason someone comes up with an idea and they think they need to address an issue is because there is still a need that hasn't been addressed. And if there are over 100 programs on housing or dozens of programs to address homelessness and the problems persist, then I think it raises questions about, are the programs really functioning as intended?
Yeah, and part of how I think about it, and I know Mr. Burchett has a background in making things and building things and living on a farm. I grew up in the irrigation business. My family owned an irrigation company. And, probably all of us have encountered a set of plumbing where they patched a system up a million times to where it's just leaking and not working anymore. And there's a point at which you have to say, we have to repipe this whole system because it's not working. And I think all of you are pointing to the fact that in many cases, we might have 100 housing programs, but we have mass homelessness in America. So what's going wrong here, right? We need to really think at a system level how to redesign these programs and take all the pieces out and then repipe it so that we're getting the impact from the dollars that we're spending. And I agree, it can't just be like gutting a program here and gutting a program here, because the whole thing is so piecemeal anyways to begin with. You're not getting really effective systems. But I do wonder, the inventory, Congress itself is going through a big modernization right now and thinking about how to effectively use AI. And I've been kind of thinking about, the possibility of using AI to do inventories of statutory codes in different areas, to think about how to streamline and redesign programs and optimize them. And I wonder if there's really an opportunity using new technology to do that. And I'll just say, as an example, and I know we have a difference of political opinion on this, but just as an example, statutorily, we were working on a war powers resolution a few weeks ago, and we wanted it to apply to the Western Hemisphere. And inside the US code, the definition of the Western Hemisphere is defined in at least a dozen different ways just in the US code. I'm like, if we can't even agree on what is in the Western Hemisphere statutorily, how the heck are we gonna figure out how to solve really complex social problems? So in terms of the inventory that you talked about, is that something that is GAO's responsibility? Is it the agencies? Do we need to pass legislation to do this? What do we do?
So there is legislation, so it's OMB's responsibility, and legislation has been enacted, and GAO has been monitoring progress on this. And in the last couple of years, we've seen improvements. So we see OMB making progress, but there's still big swaths of it that are not where they need to be and not consistent with what the statute requires in terms of descriptions of programs and funding information, and also comprehensive. Like, none of the DoD programs are included in the inventory right now. So there are also a number of programs that are just missing from the program inventory. But there is at least a start on a solid program inventory.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, it'd be worth us considering thinking about congressional modernization. Like, is there an internal process that we would want to govern ourselves so that when bills come up for reauthorization or new concepts, that we're not just passing random bills that create more duplication? So look forward to working with you on this. Thank you.
I've often said that how you expect a bunch of people to regulate something or to become something more efficient and newer when they're still driving a 1972 Gremlin, listening to an 8-track tape player, and wearing a powder blue leisure suit. I'm kind of partial to powder blue leisure suits, but y'all get the P. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, you can Google it. Just nod in approval. Bobert, Ms. Bobert, would you like to say something? Ask a few questions. Here, take this one.
It's busted. Well, thank you all so much for being here. And I think a lot of this will be a little repetitive from your testimonies, but I just think it's important for us to get an understanding so we can help best to our ability to eliminate a lot of the duplicative programs that are out there and the money that's being spent. And so, there are major categories that we've heard today from y'all about these duplicative efforts that reports have identified, talking about fragmentation, overlap, and duplication. So I would, can you help explain to the American people what fragmentation is, overlap is, what the duplications are, so then we can best identify them and eliminate a lot of this. I've just had county commissioners in my office, and they want more technology to identify those who may be getting programs elsewhere from other counties, other cities, other states even, or even just the process where they are going to apply. For instance, so we have TANF, so to qualify for TANF, you have to have children. And it doesn't come until the end of their application process where that question is even asked. So we see a lot of times just that process of going through the application is very onerous because at the very beginning, it doesn't ask, do you have children? And they're going through all of this. There's county staff that are working to get them approved and then come to the end and find out we just wasted all of this time. So are there issues in defining the fragmentation, overlap, duplications that we can identify, so maybe we can eliminate some of this red tape and programs and identify eligibility more accurately? Ms. Brown.
So GAO has defined the three separately, and I think as one of the other participants mentioned, GAO's definition is a strict definition, so it's 2 programs serving the same population, like for the same reason. Overlap, you could have similar programs achieving a similar mission, but they may be targeting different populations, like the example of veterans homelessness versus, low income homeless or housing. So similar programs, they may be serving different populations, and then fragmented programs are programs that have somewhat similar missions, but they may be addressing different components of it. So you may be dealing with a behavioral health issue. There is a behavioral component to it. There may be a housing component to it as well as other supportive services. So it's fragmented across a number of different programs and in many cases agencies. And I think across all three, kind of whatever bucket, there is an element of administrative complexity that's introduced, particularly from the recipient's or the beneficiary's perspective. If you look at disaster assistance, for example, and the number of agencies involved in that, just imagine that you are facing one of the worst days of your life because of a major disaster, and you then have to navigate through a morass of federal programs to try to get the assistance that you need.
Okay, and I'll give everyone else an opportunity to kind of weigh in on the many issues I brought up there. But do you see it being more beneficial to have more NGOs or to kind of reduce the amount of NGOs that we are giving money out to that may be overlapping in some of these areas where folks are receiving benefits? Because we see these NGO groups kind of fragmenting some of this work. And so would cutting those resources from NGOs help and it coming more directly from the government and more directly to, say, our counties and those local offices rather than these private groups?
I think it depends. I think it would depend on the program and what you were trying to achieve. I do find it interesting that the more complex the structure, you will see a cottage industry that will emerge around it to kind of help people navigate through all of the different programs and become the interface. I think that does raise an efficiency question, but I think the administrative piece of it is worth looking at to see, does it make sense for it to go through an intermediary, or are there more efficient ways to get the assistance more directly to people who are in need?
Thank you.
You go first.
So the one thing I would suggest is,
He's on. You just turned him off.
okay, try it again. The one thing I would suggest is to maintain a focus on what the goal of the program is as opposed to the process, right? Like, we got that chart because people were more focused on individual pieces of the puzzle and the process, not the outcome of how can we make sure that somebody has a home to live in, right? Mr. Kogan made an interesting point about, well, you could have 2 programs, one that serves veterans, one that serves seniors. They both have the same amount of money. You eliminate one, now you have denied benefits to somebody. I would say that's a very uniquely Washington way to look at this. You know, you all represent different states. They have very different populations. If instead of eliminating the amount of money, half of, the $50 million from one pot, the state's got $100 million, but we're told to go forth and solve the problem of both of these groups, that would be a smarter way to run a system than one in which Washington says, hey, $50 million is exactly the right amount of money to spread across 50 states. They're all very different and have very different populations in this program, and that's the way it shall be. And each of those programs, by the way, have their own reporting requirements, their own recipients, their own you name it, all the red tape that goes with operating a program. So in some sense, what I would suggest is a little bit of humility about what Washington can solve, as opposed to how Washington should think about these problems and provide funding to the people who are on the ground actually hoping to solve those problems.
I have two comments, and they're both related. The first is that, if any of your offices requested that GAO do a report asking for these different programs to report back to you what the goals of the program actually are, I suspect that more than half couldn't tell you that, right? They'll tell you, oh, my goal is to get money out the door by September 1st every year. And I think that that's a problem, right? Because it comes back to what Matt was saying, we need some kind of unified goal. What are you actually trying to achieve? And then the acting comptroller made, I think, a really important point about this cottage industry, right? One of the issues here is that these programs have become so complicated that now you need people to help you figure out the paperwork and how to actually get the money, right? So for instance, there's a program called E-Rate, right? The intent of the program is to make sure it's run through the FCC, and it's to make sure that schools have access to high-speed internet or funding that gets them access to high-speed internet. It's super important in places like New Mexico. There are 510 registered companies that help schools do this, right? We spend billions of dollars a year just to get people the access to the paperwork that allows them to access the federal monies. That's insane. And we need to step back and think about how do you restructure these things so that we make it easier for people to access stuff that they really need and that there's transparency there, and that importantly, people are not getting rich on the backs of the federal government just by acting as these middlemen. That's where a tremendous amount of waste is.
My goodness. Okay, this time it's working. So to your question, Congresswoman, I actually think that that's, in general, I agree with the acting comptroller that it depends on the program, but in general, the more groups involved in something, the more opportunity for fraud there is, 100%. Right? It's like, if you have like 7 different steps before it gets to the people, that's where you can get people involved. Like, we obviously have seen tons of reports across the United States. And so in general, we should always be looking, is there a way that we can deliver it directly? In some cases, it just won't make sense. But like the quintessential example is you get your Social Security, right? You just get it. You just get it. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to do all this stuff. That's something, there's a reason that people love it. It's because it's government actually working correctly. And so that to the extent that we can find ways to root out 13 steps, that's great. The one problem behind it, the one tension, and I think you could ask every single member of this subcommittee and everyone would have a different kind of prior there, is sometimes the complication comes from the fact that we are working really hard to make sure this group of people gets it and not that group of people. And that might be legitimate, that might be illegitimate, everyone's gonna have a different opinion there. But when you have tons of different qualifications, it becomes a lot harder to make sure that the person hits all of those. Social Security is really easy. We track it really easily, and so we can just sign you up. If you have complicated income, if you have complicated and always changing living circumstances, the government can't just give it for you unless it is doing massive oversight and massive tracking that we don't want them to do, because that would be too scary. Legitimately, it'd be very bad if the government is looking at every single thing that you're doing. And so sometimes it's a trade-off that we have in making sure the program is only hitting its intended people that makes it so there has to be more bureaucracy, and that makes it so it's more complicated, and that means more people are involved. And so that's a tension that we're always going to have for these programs.
I just want to point out, so a lot of, again, going back to our county commissioners, I've met with a lot of, I want a sheriff and county commissioner takeover of our country. I think they do a great job of running their counties, much better than the federal government at most stages. But a lot of them are going through the eligibility through like Equifax. They're paying a lot of money to check and verify that eligibility, but there are other programs that are out there as well that I've heard of folks using and really reducing the amount of time that is spent verifying the eligibility, and it seems a lot more efficient. And I'm not propping up one program over another, but I know compared to Equifax, I've heard of like a Steady IQ, where that group is going in at a much lower rate, rather than spending, maybe it's 20, 30 cents per person to look every time and verify, it's closer to 10 cents per person or even less. And they're actually able to check those income qualifications on multiple different levels rather than just a W-2. And then the speed is better. You know, we know you're eligible, we know you're ineligible, and they're able to actually get those dollars out the door. And so maybe just on a technology front, if there was better technology, better systems available to verify that, and then even bringing in AI or something like that, more technology to the table, for, like you said, the actual application of it. So you don't have to hire so many people to just fill out a form, and that is simplified across the board. I just think that these are, you know, very easy avenues for us to go after and even suggest to our local electeds back home who are really on the ground running these programs that we have implemented and put all these requirements on. So, you know, just those in general, I think, are great to look at and boost. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Crockett, would you like to ask any questions? All right. And I guess, would you like to ask it, or can I go ahead? You all right with me?
I have lots more questions, but please.
Okay. Ms. Brown, it says Acting Comptroller Brown, but I'm just going to call you Comptroller Brown. How about that? Would that be all right with you, ma'am? All right. I'm chairman, allegedly, so I get to do that. Allegedly.
We're going to
Yes,
will
ma'am.
it into existence.
Yeah, I don't know about all that. But as the Government Accountability Office, I know I said accounting office, so I suspect Noah, that looks like his chicken scratches, wrote accountability, so that's why I don't like initials, because I would get that wrong. Have the individual federal programs in areas of welfare like housing, job training, and food assistance, do you have some numbers? Have y'all counted the number of individual federal programs in those?
So years ago, we did count the number of housing programs, and it was well over 100. I did take a look at the federal program inventory.
Well over 100?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
And I did take a look at the federal program inventory, and it identified 119 housing programs based on what's included. That wouldn't include some programs, but yes.
All right. Your organization has done extensive work identifying and cataloging waste and inefficiency across the government. What can we in Congress do to capitalize on these efforts and deliver actual results for the American people? Like I said in my opening remarks, I'm sick of writing strong letters. America wants to see something. Let's talk about that.
So one of the things that I think Congress really needs to do, and where we've seen movement in addressing some areas, it's been because Congress has taken a strong role in the process. So I think providing strong oversight and holding agencies accountable for demonstrating the effectiveness of the programs. Programs are set up with a clear mission. There are things they're supposed to accomplish. But we've gotten to the point that programs aren't expected to demonstrate that they actually have fulfilled on the goals that they were established to do. And Congress instead is fighting to address any changes to the program. So I think we need to kind of right-size the ship, that when agencies come up, they should be expected to demonstrate that the programs are working effectively. And if they're not, Congress needs to be asking really hard questions in terms of why and what needs to be done to correct it, or move those resources to a program that is working and deliver the services there.
You make a lot of sense, ma'am. You have no place in federal government. If I get you across the table, I could fist bump you right there, but I can't reach. Mr. Winfrey, it took a long time for this huge and enormously inefficient mass of federal programs to be created. Does this Rube Goldberg scheme result from some sort of intelligent design, or did just a bunch of historical accidents and politicians wanting to put their name on new programs?
That's a great question. I mean, look, I think that a lot of this gets back to the budget process, right? And the budget process that we live under right now was designed 100 years ago, quite literally, right? The folks who came up with this came up with it around the same time as the First World War. It was enacted in 1921. It's actually the authorization statute that created the General Accounting Office, now the Government Accountability Office. And it was last amended in 1974. A lot has changed since 1974. And I think one of the problems that we have right now is that nobody takes responsibility for all of the inequities and all of the waste and all of the fraud and all of the duplication. The states don't take responsibility for it, the locals don't take responsibility for it, in Congress, the authorizing committees don't, and the appropriators don't, right? And so what happens is that the authorizers create something whenever there's an opportunity to create something, usually during a time of crisis, and then that thing never goes away because no one has an incentive to evaluate it. And then every year the appropriators come on top of it and are doing whatever it is that they're doing because they're constituencies that they're trying to play to. And in the 1970s, we knew that this was a problem, and that's why they created the budget committees. But, and I say this as a former longtime Senate Budget Committee staff, the budget committees have failed. They're not doing their job.
We haven't passed a budget in 33 years.
We haven't
or
passed a
something.
budget in 33 years, and in part, again, because the process is broken down. But ultimately, I think that it all comes back to goals, right? And we need to make sure that, not only is Congress thinking deeply about what it is trying to do, and it is statutorily setting goals on programs and then evaluating them in a rigorous way and figuring out whether or not they work. But also, we need to have a much deeper conversation about what the goals of economic policy are and what it is that we're trying to do, right? So if you go back to the 1970s when they enacted the 1974 Budget Act, there was pretty broad consensus on what the goals of economic policy were at a very minimum. Stable prices, right? No inflation or very little inflation, low unemployment, and economic growth. And if you fast forward to today and ask, any member of Congress what they think the goals of economic policy might be, I suspect it's not as clean cut as that. And so I think we need to go back. We need to have a big public conversation about what it is we're trying to do here, and then how best to try to tackle that. But I do think it all comes back to process, and I think the process will ultimately need to get overhauled. And because your committee is so cross-cutting, this might be the place to start doing that.
Please. And then I want to go to the next one I got for him, but go ahead, ma'am. No,
Just
you're good.
because I think it's an interesting piece of this is that I think before I worked at OMB, I would have agreed with you wholeheartedly, but one of the issues that we regularly ran into is the statutory requirements, right? So take any program, let's take housing. We pass a bill that says we're going to create a grant program for nonprofit organizations to provide housing to veterans. Mm-hmm. Someone else passes a bill that says the VA is going to provide direct service to veterans and provide funding for housing stipends. Mm-hmm. And in the statutes, the language actually says each of these agencies has to go through a regulatory process to come up with criteria. The bills are not standardized in even what they say about how you administer the programs. And so I guess one piece and question I would like to bring to the conversation is, even if we did it all through the appropriations process, you can eliminate funding for programs, but you can't statutorily change the way those programs are articulated together. And so I wonder how you would marry that. So let's use VA housing, for example. Like, how do we streamline these programs in a thematic way to deliver on the outcome?
I think this is the problem, right? You need to give the authorizers skin in the game. You need to give them an incentive to actually evaluate these programs, figure out what's working, what's not working, figure out what the goals are, and change what needs to be changed. Right now, they're not doing that. They're spending very little time with that.
Structurally, that would require like us changing our parliamentary system here in Congress, right? Like, so how would you do that here in Congress? What would you do?
You need to change the budget process entirely. And I think that one of the things that you might think about doing is combining the appropriations and authorization committees once again. The only reason, by the way, that the Appropriations Committee exists is because there was a very powerful member during the American Civil War, and they needed another job for him to do. They needed to get him out of the Ways and Means Committee. That's why the Appropriations Committee was first created in the House, and then the Senate picked it up. So it's a historical anomaly. I'm not saying that that is the only way to get at this, but I do think we need to get the authorizers actually working towards reform, and the only way to do that is to incentivize them to do so.
Well, getting rid of the Appropriations Committee should be easy, right?
I'll vote for it right now. Dadgum, I don't care.
I think Ms. Crockett wants to ask a
Oh,
question.
Ms.
You
Crockett.
had a chance. Yeah.
Well, you go. You're good. We're good. I promise you, ma'am. I promise you. We're good. I promise.
Go ahead, Chairman. I got you. We got time.
All right. This is back to Mr. Winfrey. This gets to the meat of this thing. Over time, our government evolved into a huge monstrosity. How do we unwind this mess? Do you have any recommendations? I mean, all of it subjective stuff is great. Give me something. Save me a few $1 million here today. I know we're not going to cut $1 trillion, but let's get real.
I mean, I think that
Give me a piece of legislation.
look, when I started off in the Trump administration in the White House, we were talking, one of the things that we wanted to do that ended up going nowhere was a big rescissions bill. And I went to OMB and I said to the career folks, I said, look, what's some like really low-hanging fruit? What's some stuff that we can just get rid of, we can rescind, we can get off the books right now? And they came up with all these programs that were authorized where there was still money available. There were still pots of money available from the 2008-2009 financial crisis. So like, for instance...
What year was this?
This was in 2017.
Okay.
So this was money that was appropriated in 2008, right? So one of those programs was to improve UI, basically benefit systems at the state level. And it just so happens that like 15 states just couldn't do that for whatever technical reasons. Now maybe they could today, right? It would be a different set of monies. But I think one thing that you should do right now is you should go to OMB and get a serious answer out of them around what are some bipartisan rescissions that can actually be done, and take them away from the appropriators. Because usually the appropriators just use this pot of money to spend elsewhere. So figure out what that is, and then just do it.
I remember when I was in the state senate in Tennessee, and I was on the finance committee, or finance, whichever you want to call it, and I found the enormous amount of $5 million with an M in Tennessee. That's a lot of money, and it was a duplication, and we cut it out. And I remember the person sitting next to me said, "Wow, Burchett, that's a really great bill." And then he said, "I know exactly where I want to spend that money."
Yeah.
And that's the mentality that you have. I've got some more questions, but I want to yield to Ms. Crockett. She's very color coordinated today, and I'm kind of digging it.
Okay, so I want to ask about something that is presently taking place. And I don't know who has the answer or what that looks like. But recently, there's been a request for 200...
Again?
Billion? Yeah, okay, there we go. I want to make sure I had the right letter, B. $200 billion to go to defense. It's my understanding that defense does have transfer authority in general right now. So I'm nervous that, well, I'm sure you can probably guess where I stand on the $200 billion in general, but nevertheless, let's say Congress was to say, hey, here's $200 billion. They still have additional transfer authority above and beyond that money. Is that not correct?
They do have standing transfer authority. DOD does.
Okay.
It's like 5% of
Yeah,
the overall budget.
they have $6 billion. They just put in $1.56 billion of it, so they have about $4.5 billion left of the transfer authority. I think the other thing I'd say, Congresswoman, is that in addition, there's 150 billion. Well, it's a little less now, but in the big beautiful bill, there's $153 billion given to defense. According to OMB's own estimates, they used $1.8 billion of it last year, which meaning that coming into this year, they had about $151 billion unused of that. Their goal was to use it all this year, but even, halfway through the year, even if they're only halfway done, that would be $80 billion kind of left unused right there. A lot of it on munitions, ships, a lot of the stuff that you would imagine would be the same sort of thing funded in the supplemental request.
Interesting. What suggestions, if any, do you have around defense? Defense is one of these spaces that even prior to the current war in the Middle East, this committee has consistently tried to get answers on what we could do to rein in defense spending, because it has been the source of a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. And we know that defense has been unable to pass an audit in the last probably 7 audits now.
Corps has passed it, not the Marine Corps.
And every time,
My daddy fought in the Pacific in the Marine Corps, so that always pops into my head. Because he didn't get anything. He was on Peleliu, and they were issuing World War I, eating whatever K rations is what they called it, World War I.
but every time we have a hearing on defense and the waste, basically they're just like, oh, it's too complicated. Usually they're complaining about the accounting. We're like, well, we're giving you more and more money, like get better accountants. Like what do we need? And they never, ever seem to talk about accountability or incentivizing. Seemingly they have been not incentivized at all because we continue to not only fund them, but we typically give them even more money than they had in the previous budgets. So what suggestions or what duplications are you seeing? There's been a lot of kind of issues as it relates to the waste, fraud, and abuse, but I know that we're specifically focusing on duplication here. So any thoughts, any bills, any steps that we can take? I would like to know about that.
So I would say one thing about DOD, the fragmentation is baked in. You have the department, and then you have the components, and there are statutory constraints around this. So DOD can only do so much. Each component will need to do its own thing, and they will chart off in their own path to do those things, even though it's the same thing that has to be replicated across each component. So it's, you have a department, and then you have each component that will do the same thing over and over again. So the fragmentation is baked in there. In terms of efficiencies, we've done a lot of work in the contracting space, just how contracts are managed, the extent to which contractors are held accountable, cost overruns, time and materials. I mean, it's just a whole range of issues when it comes to DOD. And we have really tried to push them in that space to make sure when they are acquiring systems that they're thinking about the intellectual property that goes along with the system. So if they then have to repair a weapons system, that they actually own the intellectual property to be able to build the subcomponents to repair it and not have to go back to a contractor. And then the contractor will say, oh, well, you don't own that. So if you want to buy that from us, it's going to cost X, and then it's so expensive. It becomes cost prohibitive to use anyone other than the contractor that originally built the weapon system. So there are a whole host of inefficiencies that are baked into the Department of Defense. And we have done work on fraud in DOD, and that's also an issue in that space because it goes back to lots of dollars. Complicated systems make it a target, rich environment for fraudsters.
Yeah, this does also come back to how, again, Congress appropriates money and why the budget process is broken, right? Like these emergency supplemental bills are how we get duplication and waste and fraud and all this other stuff. Like, you know, what's going on in the Middle East, I'm no defense expert, I don't claim to be, right? What's going on in the Middle East right now may be an actual emergency, they may need the money, I just don't know. But I will say that it seems to me like these emergency requests are occurring more frequently than actual emergencies are, and that's one of the reasons why we should be very, diligent and making sure that whatever the emergency is and whatever appropriations are being made for it are very specific, and that the goals are time sensitive and intentional.
I want to be respectful. Well, after you finish, we've got to do another vote, so go ahead, Bobby.
I just want to quickly hit on what Paul said there. In fiscal year 2025, we did a $5.7 or $5.8 billion emergency acquisition for DOD to buy some submarines. Why did we need emergency money to buy some submarines last year? that, there wasn't an emergency. What happened was the DOD conveniently left out that they were way behind budget when they were doing budget planning for some of their acquisitions. When they were planning the budget for FY 2025, in the last year of the Biden admin, DOD kind of left that out. And then when it was too late in the process to kind of to rejigger the process to say, okay, we'll do less here, more here to make it all fit within the budget, they said, oh my God, we're out of money now. It needs to be an emergency, otherwise we're not going to be able to make our payments. So there's two parts. There's a political question. How much are we going to give DOD is fundamentally a political question. Even if we find savings here, normally the top line, I remember the year that they asked for 750.000000000. Do you think that the greatest minds in all of America got together and they added up everything and it came out to exactly 750, whatever. But the other part about it is that a lot of the people are not seeking the trade-offs, right? That example of the emergency submarines was they didn't want to do trade-offs. They waited until it was too late. And so that's what some of these requests come down to.
All right, I'm going to make an executive decision. Your time's valuable, more than ours is. I'm going to call this meeting. We got to go vote, and I apologize to everybody. I appreciate it. I'm going to float around to both parties some legislation that we're working on that we've had drafted, and I'd hope it'd be bipartisan. And we want to continue our conversation with you all. If you've got any great ideas, just give us a call. Let's jump on this thing. This is a bipartisan thing, and thank y'all so much for being here. And
What program gets us these fancy mugs?
the former chair lady gave me that dadgum mug, and I looked down. I didn't know I was drinking out of a Doge one, and I looked down. Hey, I'm in Doge. See, it says Congressman Tim Burchett on it. And I, as someone who is thrifty, I'm not gonna be spending any money to get. I don't have that kind of money. I don't get those kind of contributions. Mine are $20, and they wrap a Bible verse. I'll give you a Bible verse. How about that, Ms. Crockett? Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.